Well, good morning, everybody, or if you're in Aussie land, good evening. Welcome to Rising exactly Australia, with focus on Australia again, with KERRI SAINT, who is no stranger to our channel now. So, welcome, KERRI. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Chantel. Thank you. I'm wearing my Snoopy today. Oh, he's over this side, and on my shirt. So that's my cheer me up shirt, and I kind of follow Snoopy a little bit. Got a little Snoopy dog, a real Snoopy dog. So yeah, it cheers me up. I love seeing it. So
Well, it cheers me up too to see you cheered up because I know you guys are having a bit of a rough time in Oz at the moment with a lot of what's going on there. I want to just say hello to all our lovely guests. Thank you so much, VVP, Gail. Nice to see you guys in the chat. Whoa, from Hawaii. It's so cool. I love watching this live chat. It's so amazing to see, and I never get enough of saying this. It's like this incredible family we have from all across the globe, tuning in from wherever in the world. It's just amazing. And thank you again for tuning in and supporting, the topics we talk about. They're not easy. And KERRI and I were actually just having a chat about the resistance, that we have. And of course, those of the incredible survivors and overcomers like KERRI, are really finding a pathway, opening up a path in a very, very dense jungle. So it's kind of like one branch at a time to create an opening, for people to see what really is being hidden. And more and more, we're just seeing how the kids have been used in the most atrocious and abominable ways. And I think the majority of resistance comes from the fact that none of us want to believe that this has been happening with our children, right under our noses for such a long time. I think the reality, of course, we understand the cognitive dissonance, but it's beautiful to see how many people are realizing and waking up to what is going on. But of course, there's a lot more that needs to happen. Anyway, and that's why we do what we do. And we have you guys on this channel. So please just like, share, subscribe, share. It's so important to share the information that we talk about here. So today with KERRI, we're going to be talking about the Benevolent Harm, I think, orphanage, as well as the Hart family murders, which was an adoptive family who killed their kids that they adopted, which is a tragedy. And also, what we're talking about is the trafficking of kids through the orphanages, which we know by now is happening. Those of you following the news of Madonna, she's up for child sex trafficking amongst a whole ream of charges that the Malawian government has got against her and amongst all of these things is child sex trafficking, slavery, and what would they call it? I keep forgetting. Social experimentation. Because they're literally taking the kids and turning them into something that they authentically are not, and it is a big social experiment, in my opinion. Anyway, to you, beautiful KERRI, thank you so much.
Hi, and I just noticed there's someone from the sunny coast in Queensland, not far from me. So, yeah, hi. So it's lovely to see some of my Aussie mates on here, and it's lovely to see, and it's great that they're tuning in. And like myself, I found you by accident, Chantel. Like I was, ferreting the surfing the net, like they say. And I came across something with one of another lady here in Australia, and I happened to make a comment in the comment section, and you picked it up and wanted to know a little bit more. And I got to have a chat to Gabby, and Yeah,
Yeah.
so
I
yeah.
remember that well. I remember that well because, as you said, I don't remember exactly who we were interviewing, I must be honest, but I definitely saw your comment and I said, no, 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 we need to talk to you. Um, so it's great to have you, yeah, and really
Yeah,
just to shed some light on these horrific topics.
yeah. Well, I can see. I'm sorry, but I've just seen a friend come up in here, and Leslie. So she's a wonderful mother of loss as well. She lost her son to forced adoption, and she's given me a tremendous amount of support in telling my story and sharing the stories of adoptees because her son is so adversely affected about what happened to him. So I've got a lot of support from mums because they support me in sharing, because many adoptees don't share their stories because of the whole narrative and how we've been brainwashed and how we're living in this a complete fog, and we have to stay obedient to the system. We have to stay silent for our adopted parents and their feelings. So many of us never speak publicly about what has happened. And even though, predominantly, you speak to me, Chantel, and there aren't too many adoptees that speak up, because of my support group, and I have access to other support groups of people all around the world, there are many, 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 many thousands of adoptees like myself, and in fact, adoptees who have suffered far worse than myself. I just, by the grace of God, I can come on here and speak and share my story and share the stories of those that can't speak as yet. All I can say about Madonna is it's about time, and I hope that there are many more exposed. I think it's great. I think children should stop um, trafficking children from their country of birth and selling them out and sending them off to live with complete strangers that have no concept and no idea of the trauma in which they carry physically and emotionally and spiritually. It needs to stop. If any country or any leaders or anybody that work with children need to just get a backbone, they need to stand up
Yeah,
and they need to stop it. Yeah.
there's a big drive in Africa and has been for quite a while, exactly for that to stop because there are these and I'm sure there are a lot of people who have good intentions, by adopting what I think is and it is, when you're looking at materially a poor African child. But, we must remember, and you would know also from your First Nation people in Australia, that the people of the land, the culture, their tribal culture, is incredibly rich. So
Yes.
even if they don't have their families, immediate families, they will invariably find a way and integrate themselves into the communities. Either
Yeah.
other families take them on and stuff like that. They really do have this, it takes a village to raise a child. That is the whole, what we call in Africa, the Ubuntu culture as well as part of that,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
take care of each other. So, and then when we have these Western saviors coming, rescuing the poor children, it has a detrimental effect on the kids that get taken out because
Yeah.
they come back also being incredibly different. So they
Mm.
immediately are ostracized, and there's something incredibly sacred about a mother braiding her daughter's hair. That is a whole African ritual in itself, the whole hair braiding and all of that, which a lot of the kids are now going to the salons and having it done there, which
Mm.
kind of immediately like takes away that whole connection because that in
Yes.
itself is huge. It's
It is.
huge,
It
huge,
is.
huge,
Yes.
you know. And please, I don't mean that European or Caucasian families should not adopt African or different tribe children. I think it's a beautiful thing to do, but it's very important to keep them in their culture. I know people who've adopted African children, white families, but they would then go and learn how to braid their hair. And they would go to the African mamas, for example, and they would sit with them and learn how to braid their hair. And they would then teach them what it is to braid their hair. So spiritually, they're entrenching themselves within that culture. They're learning, and that's a beautiful thing. I have no problem with that. But when you're taking them out to rob from them and steal from them and think that your way is better than their way, that in itself is a travesty, because you're doing exactly what the colonizers have done. And when I talk about the colonizers, do I exclude my ancestors? Oh, hell no. Of course, we understand that. But from my side, you know what? I'm going to try and undo as much as what harm has been done in the way that I can do it. So that's why I speak the language that I do regarding this. So just in terms of, and I know it's not, and you know, people need to understand this about Africa. You know, we are not, you know, our continent is incredibly rich. Our people are poor. Why?
Yeah.
Now we look at all the big mining industries in here, and we see how they've raped this continent since forever, using it as their grocery store, getting the African people to mine their resources and give it to them. I mean, how crazy is that? So there's a whole thing around that, and I don't really want to make it about that only, but that's, you know, we need to understand with adoption, there is so much. Keep the person within the culture. And if you're not of that culture, then teach yourself about that culture. Integrate it. Yes, teach them about your culture too. That's beautiful. But you can't take their culture away and make it yours. Big problem right there. When we're looking at the chakras, root connection, this root chakra disconnection occurs right there, because that is your roots into your family, your heritage, your ancestors, you know, that's in your blood, and you cannot deny a child that ever. Enrich it, yes, by adding more of what might be wonderful, but do not take away that core, and that's what's so necessary.
Yeah, we've got it's all over the news here. It's terrible up north, like up north of Queensland and Alice Springs and that. Currently, there's enormous amount of violence and theft, and just young people walking the streets with machetes and other weaponry and attacking businesses and people. And like, I can't remember what they said, there's an enormous amount of cars being stolen every day. And predominantly the white community are absolutely outraged and frightened. They had a massive big town hall. They've called the Prime Minister up there and demanding action. And, you know, when I was a youth worker and I would go to court with some of my clients, 9 out of 10 young people that were appearing in court were Indigenous. And I will get to speak to some of their parents and other support services for these young people. And it goes back to the fact that the parents were taken as children with all the stolen generation and placed in orphanages, and they lost their entire culture, and along with it, they were beaten. Like, they couldn't speak their own language, they were beaten, they were abused, they were made to work for no money, they had no education, so they lost that capacity to parent. So as they leave the orphanage and go and make their own life as adults, they become parents and they don't know how to parent. They've lost their tribe, they've lost their entire culture and connectedness, and then society's wondering why these young people are now out of control. And so this is what's happening in the Northern Territory, and the whole way the government comes in and demands that they live a particular way and rule them with an iron rod. Don't honour their culture, don't honour their family traditions or whatever. So now we have this explosion of young people who are suffering domestic violence and abuse and alcoholism within the home because their parents were traumatised and abused, and their grandparents. Is utterly horrific. And I'd like to know, where are, like, the churches in the sense of pastors and good men to come in and role model, rather than be screaming that these kids be put into juvenile detention centres and being given harsher sentences. All you're going to do is create even more trauma. It's just going to continue to explode. Yes, intervention needs to occur. Yep. Why they're asking, yeah, so true. Yeah. to raise their
It doesn't
children.
serve them.
Correct. And
Doesn't
that's it.
serve them.
No,
Doesn't.
they
That's
take
what
the
we.
children and put them with foster parents, probably down here in Brisbane there, or anywhere else, instead of within their community and their culture. And they'll and this is what they do. And those kids feel completely lost and alone and disconnected. They're not treated like you said, Chantel. They're not taught about their culture. And when they're old enough, they run away and they go back to their family, and their family now has disintegrated because they're all suffering grief and trauma from the loss of this child. And the cycle keeps going, and it keeps going.
Yep.
And so, for any of my Australian citizens and friends or whatever, that's my point of view. Don't be jumping them down demanding that these children be punished more than what they already have. They need love, they need support, they need firmness and kindness, and they need good role models around them. They need to know how to break the cycle. And
this is interesting. What Gail is saying here is interesting, and I agree because
yes.
I and yet I do. Are you guys? I don't know. The Australians familiar with Bruce Shillingsworth, who does a lot to. Yeah,
yep.
He does a lot to have the voice of the Australian Indigenous people heard. But it's true. Where is the Indigenous voice for the people of Australia when it comes to this?
Yes.
This, I think, for me, because I know I'm also, and I look at South Africa, and I recently had interviewed Pixie Pink. Guys,
yes.
This is one amazing lady. I recently connected with her. We've been trying for months to get hold of her. So we will be doing future shows with her as well. But she's exposing the horrific underbelly of child trading, trafficking, not registering, just horror of horrors, and we're not even talking. If you think this is the African community, oh hell no. We are talking now. Understand in South Africa, of course, because of the apartheid system, we've had a hierarchy here, right? So, of course, the whites were top of the food chain, literally, in Africa for a very long time. So, but of course, in the last 30 years, that has changed dramatically. So there are a lot of white families that live below the breadline. And of course, that in itself, with this whole change of narrative in our country, you can understand what psychologically that has done to someone who hasn't been prepared for it, right or wrong. That's not the point. We're dealing with the reality of what that is. Now, the children are suffering because these children are born, they're not even registered, right?
Yeah.
There are so many of these kids not even registered in normal family homes whose parents are drug, and they're not even linked to the cabal, to any child pedophile trafficking ring, whatever. But they are in normal families where the parents can't now afford to buy their drugs anymore. She told me, for example, a 13-year-old, she's working on a case at the moment with a 13-year-old girl who's being sold to a lawyer.
I know, I heard that.
And I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh. So this is happening. And she says all the rich people, and she's not aware of the satanic ritual abuse, right? And she's telling me all the rich people are buying these children. She said, Chantal, why? And I'm going, I'll tell you why. So we're starting to link the dots as well. So we are getting more and more voices. There are a lot of African voices speaking up. Just that South Africa is a very big country. Africa is a very large continent, and there's a lot of shit that has gone down here over the years. So it's a very dirty, messy, stinky, horrible, slimy cesspool of crap we're dealing with.
Yes.
And this is why I think that it's so important that we do have the Indigenous voice that stands up for these. I know my brother, who lives in Australia, is a house father for 2 Aboriginal children. And I mean, and he took, and I got to tell you, he took the tea twice for that reason.
Yeah.
Because if he didn't take it, he would not be able to work with those boys, and he was
Correct.
not prepared to let them down. And that's what
Wow.
I'm saying. So he's there, and I mean, he's doing an amazing job, and he's very, very artistic, very creative. So he
Yeah.
shares that with them. And so there are people that are doing incredible things. I just know that from him.
Yes.
But it has to be the Indigenous voice, because even though the Indigenous people have been completely bashed down and absolutely had everything possible done to destroy them, there has to be somebody who's standing up for their children as
Oh,
far as this
definitely.
is concerned.
Yes. Yeah. And I could imagine those families struggling under the enormous weight of the trauma that, is generational, just horrific. Like, I know what I've lived through, I know what others have lived through. And, you know, when I see this on TV, I see these children just so violent, lashing out. That's a child in trauma. That's a child that's suffered, and it just breaks my heart when there are so many just so angry. How dare they? And I just think, wow, they might be breaking into your car or doing a bit of, violence, but they were ripped from their whole family and culture. How violent can you get? That's the whole
Absolutely.
of who they are and their
Absolutely.
whole being. And someone's not stepping in and trying to help because they're being abused at home. Oh, just I shake my head, but that's what's
Absolutely.
happening at the moment. Yeah, yeah. So I don't know what our government, our very kind government, is going to figure out, but I think it's the people. People have to start realizing the government's not going to save you. They're not, and
No,
that you need to start pulling together as a community and coming up with a plan yourself. Your government sold you out. I'm sorry, I'm sitting here, I'm going to say it. They have sold us out. So it's at
true.
communities. What's in South Australia? You just, yeah, I agree. They have major mental health issues, so damaged that their own families will not allow them back home. So where do they go? Like, that's it. Like, and we have to take ownership for this. We come out here sailing
Exactly.
on a boat, take their land, strip them of everything, and uh, you know, this is the
Absolutely.
result. This is result. You can't
Easy, thank you
blame.
so much. Sorry, I
Yeah,
just wanted to say thank you to Easy
yeah.
there, who's
Thank you.
given us
Yeah,
a donation.
yeah,
I really appreciate that.
yeah.
Um, and I was just looking at you also, Easy, what you were saying is, and we were also having this conversation early on. If we all did a gathering and sent love and light at the same time, I want to say yes, absolutely. We have to get the energy intact. But you know what I say to people like this, who have these conversations that I have with that I have these conversations with. Excuse me, I was getting tongue tied there. What I say is, we all should be praying anyway and meditating and sending light or whatever it is that you feel you contribute in that way to this planet. However, we have to act as well. I have so many people saying, well, I'm aware and I'm praying. And I'm going, but are you aware that someone is praying for you to do something?
Mm.
Are you aware that you could physically be the answer to somebody's prayer? It's one thing, you know, uh, having the right integrity and understanding and knowledge about stuff. But what are we doing with that?
Mm.
And I think now is the time more than anything that we have to act. We have to actually do something within our communities, within our church, within our school, within our family. Starts with a
Yeah,
family. If your family is in dire strait and you're fighting and there's abuse going on there and your children or your that's where you begin.
mm.
Start healing.
Mm.
Start with the healing process individually, whatever that might be for you.
Yeah,
Reach out to people. There are thousands of people out there at the moment who really are asking to help. There are
yeah,
lots of amazing healers. You don't trust anyone just because they say trust them. You've got to
yeah,
use your discernment. But
yes,
start with listening to podcasts. Start by reading books. Start by following someone's channel who gives you an inspiration. It's not going to cost you anything right now except the internet, which if you're on here, you have it anyway. So I think, that's how we begin. We start by acting and creating awareness, just by feeding a homeless person today, and don't post it on Facebook. Start with one random act of kindness a day.
Yeah.
Let's start by doing, acting. You can be the answer to somebody's prayer. You could be the person that picks that child up in the moment, or happens to stop the car because you did something, and so that person wasn't chasing that one. I don't know. God works in mysterious ways. There's a beautiful way that the universe works, but we have to act. We've got to start acting.
You could be the answer. You could be the answer in your own prayer, and people don't realize that. And I want to break. I hope it's okay. I know we're getting off topic a little bit, but if you want to do work, if you want to help people, this is what I did, and then people can choose to take my advice on this, or they might find another way. But if you're married, I'll guarantee you that you and your partner have brought something into that marriage, and there's been contention there. The first thing you start at is that you apologize to each other. You recognize it, own your stuff, apologize to each other. And you know what the most important things do? Apologize to each other in front of your children. And then you also, and I did this in my family, right? And I was on my knees while I was having worship with my children one morning, and I looked at my children and I said, I want to say I'm sorry for things that I've said and done in impatience and shortness and unkindness, or I just didn't know any better. And I started there. That's where you start, right? Those children see that and they learn from that. You've got to heal within your own family first. You've got to start there first. And then that's when you start.
I want to just say, and I don't want to, and please just hold that thought, but what you just said there was so important. It's apologizing, being accountable, because when you make that apology, especially in front of your kids, you hold yourself accountable. And then, and then from that moment, you rebuild. From that's the moment of alchemy, as I call it. That's the moment where you become humble. That's the moment where you become vulnerable. And from that moment, thereafter is your resurrection.
Yes. And you'd be surprised what starts to evolve after that, and if you lay the foundation and you trust in it, and then you start stepping out. But we all make mistakes. I mean, I've made doozies of mistakes, and even, up until recently, I've made mistakes. But as soon as it's pointed out to me, or I begin to recognize it, I want to fix it straight away. And I want to recognize that I have hurt another person, and, even if it was done by absolute mistake, not on purpose. You validate their feelings, you validate them, and then you apologize, and then you let it go. And it's the best thing you can do for them, and it's the best thing you can do for yourself, So, I was a youth worker for over 17 years. I worked with children who've been in prison. I worked with children who've been in psych wards. I've worked with children that tried to kill me. I was amazed when I would address the kids for their bad behavior. The first thing I would say was, I really like you, and they, half the time they'd be stunned because they're just hearing, I need you to stop doing this, or you can't do that. But they would pull me up and go, I'm still trying to get past the bit where you started with, I like you. So I would address the behavior, not the person. So it's the behavior that needs to be addressed, not the person, because the minute you attack the person, they're going to get offended, they're going to shut off. And you need to help people understand that you walk in the same shoes they do, the same issues they face every day, you face every day. We're no different. We're all the same, except maybe I've got a few extra tools and I'd like to share them. I think we we assume that people are not completely can't understand what we're experiencing and have no idea. When I was a youth worker, I don't swear, right? I don't tell dirty jokes, whatever, and I'd be around, a bunch of young teenagers. And I remember some of the kids would come along and they'd say, what would you know? You were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You probably went to university. And I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. And a couple of kids that had been in the shelter longer would put the kids straight. And because I would eventually shared a bit about my life. I was torn from my mother at birth, lived in poverty, failed high school, stole as a kid, drank like a fish, swore like a trooper, told the filthiest jokes. And, when they're telling the other kids are like, but how'd you turn out like this? Like, how do you get a job like this? Why are you not swearing? Why are you not this? Why are you not that? And I said, because I made a conscious choice. I wanted something better for myself. This is what I choose for me. So they started to go, well, if you can achieve this and you flunk school, you've got this position, this high position in this workplace, you're earning good money, you've got a beautiful marriage, great kids, they start to see it. And, and at no stage did I ever condemn them for because you'll turn them off straight away. But that's how I approached it. And it was really lovely just to act in that moment as a kind, compassionate person with an understanding that they're acting out of trauma. You address the trauma, you address their behavior, you validate the person as being worthwhile and valuable. And
well, there are African tribes. In fact, it's interesting because I saw something on Twitter yesterday, and someone was questioning if this was actually happening. Where if someone has done something wrong or bad, instead of punishing them, they will surround the person and actually take the day or two or three or a week and remind the person of everything that is good and wonderful about them, why they, little stories maybe as a child, why they like them, all the good things they did. And that conjures up, that beautiful, call it the God spirit in us. Not that it's separate from anything else, but I'm just using that for easy terms right now. So, you call that up and you reintegrate that into your being, and you remind yourself of all the good things, and you need others to help you with that. And that's why, what you say in these situations, starting off, I really like you. I think you're a cool kid. And I mean, I work a lot with kids as like teenagers, and they do the most atrocious things, and their mothers send them to thinking it's a punishment. Meanwhile, all we do is have fun there. I'm going like, so tell me what that was about. Was it fun? Did you get a kick out of that? Did it work out for you? Why not? So instead of berating, it's so good to just kind of conversate, talk, have a communication about that, which is so important. Anyway, we've had a great conversation, and everything is related because I think it's so important to talk about the healing, and especially when it comes to these types of traumatic situations. But I would love to hear about the orphanages we were speaking about. I think the Benevolent Harm, I think you said it was called, and the child trafficking and stuff that goes on there. So maybe you can just give us some little info on what all that's about.
Okay, so I came across a lady called Tara Winkler, and she a few years ago, and she's a young Australian. She was interviewed on 60 Minutes, and she was only 24-year-old when she became Australia of the Year in 2010 for opening an orphanage in Cambodia. She was about 22 when she started volunteering in an orphanage in a town of Batum Bag, before realising the director was actually embezzling donations and abusing the children. So after discovering the abuses, she set up her own orphanage in Cambodia. It's called the Cambodian Children's Trust. And the government gave her full support to remove children from former orphanages and to actually rehouse them. It was basically doing this work that the children began to learn English, and she began to realise that there was pretty horrendous truth behind how they came in, to the orphanages and the orphanage trade. So in 2011, SBS did a story on her based on a submission she made to an Australian inquiry about her experiences and how there's such a thing called orphanage tourism in Cambodia, and it's nothing more than modern-day slavery. So 3 years after she was named New South Wales Young Australian of the Year for setting up an orphanage in Cambodia, the orphanage has now gone and the kids are now housed with families or foster parents. Her change of heart is part of a growing sentiment against the spread of orphanages in third world countries where it's believed or where it's labelled as the orphan tourism. So basically orphan tourism is when the orphanage advertises to, you know, people who might backpack around the world, or you want to have a holiday and they invite you to come and spend time in their orphanage, and you're supposed to be there to maybe teach the kids English, help out with activities. But unfortunately, it's got a very seedy, horrendous dark side to it. So you've got pedophiles going over there and accessing these children. And there are orphan directors, people who run these orphanages, knowingly handing these children over. So when you do orphan tourism, you actually pay to attend that orphanage. You become like a volunteer, but you pay money to go and have access to these children. And a lot of these children are being sexually abused. So this is what this young lady found out in Cambodia. So she basically set up her own orphanage, but as she was teaching them English, I remember she was telling the story. It was like a young 12-year-old girl started to tell her she's not a legit orphan. She had parents and that she was being abused. So she takes a complete turnaround, realizes her horror that she's actually aiding, abetting what we call this benevolent harm. She's benevolently going along and contributing to the harm and trauma of these children. And I think it's something we should be all made aware of, because I turn on my TV and every day on the internet and support this orphanage, right? Now, some years ago, I was at a church and I heard a pastor speaking, and he was all about the orphanage over in the Congo and how, you know, anybody wants to support it. And I cornered him outside and I was like, I don't want to support an orphanage. I want to tell you my background. I want to tell you what I feel about orphanages and how I believe children should be supported within the families that they live. And I don't believe that the amount of children in orphanages are the factual number. So he went away, he came back, he said, I agree with you. And he says, I'm going to look into it and I'm going to see what I can do. So after a few weeks, he rings me and he says, if I was willing to support children, like say a family, mum and dad's had his suffered an injury and he can't use his legs, would I help buy a wheelchair and buy a goat or a cow or something, and then or mum a sewing machine, so they're able to create their own money and they can feed the children. And because most of the children were being sent to the orphanage because they got fed 2 meals a day and went to school. If you were so poor that you couldn't afford to send your kids to school, your kids didn't get an education. So a lot of families that were intact were dropping their children off at the orphanage. So I started this whole thing where he'd never had anybody approach him before to do it, where I started supporting families. I wouldn't send my money to the orphanage. And so I started keeping a bit of a record, and I started realizing that I could support a number of families to stay intact and together. So even though there are orphanages that seem legitimate, you really have to, and I can go into it further because I've got more information on it, you really have to be careful about where you're sending your money, who you're sending it to, and is it legit. So UNICEF report 2011 found the number of orphanages in Cambodia had doubled in the space of 5 years, even though most children had parents. In response to her own orphanage, there's this young Tara, she states she had moments of despair thinking about that she had inadvertently become yet another orphanage to add the already growing list. The conclusion she sort of comes to is that no matter how good an orphanage is, the best place for a child is within their family. So now, instead of building orphanages in Cambodia with the Cambodian Children's Trust, she provides a range of education and health programs for poor families and striving to keep families together. And what she actually did, she got support from the government to get social workers to actually go and, in search of these families, find the children, their parents, to relink. If they couldn't find mum and dad, they found a family member, aunt, uncle, grandparents, older siblings. And what she also does is she encourages the parents to come to an educational program so that the parents learn the skills and abilities to hold down a job and to work more closely. Because you can imagine if you've even inadvertently handed your children over to an orphanage and then some of those kids are being abused, there's a lot of trauma counselling and support that needs to occur so that child can trust mum and dad to go back. So they're the types of things that many of us should be putting our money into. 60 Minutes covered a story in 2017 where she basically exposes that orphanages are big business, where donors, volunteers are fleeced, using the children in illicit donation scams and even worse. So we've got orphanages basically scamming people in many Australians and overseas, where your money's being sent over there and the children are not even getting the care and the goods that they should be getting. So I'll choose one story. So there was a particular organisation that supported an orphanage in Nepal, and there were 40 Australians that reported to have been scammed by this one fake orphanage alone, and it amounted to $480,000. The Nepalese charity responsible had deceived an Australian charity called Forget Me Not, and it's a very well-known charity here in Australia, in supporting the cause by falsely claiming the kids had lost both of their parents. The Nepalese charity even falsified the parents' death certificates to show the Australian operation that these were legitimate orphans. The non-government organisation, now I'm having trouble pronouncing this, it's MALNA, it's Barusi Bal Gria, if anybody can know what that actually is properly pronounced, but it's a government organisation in Nepal.
Spell it for me.
It's MAL NA BIRISU BAL GRIHA.
Mona Birisubal Griha.
Yeah, so it's like Mal, the three letters, NA on its own, Barusi on its own, Bal on its own, and Griya on its own. And I can send it through and write it through to you, and people might want to try and find it. But they'd actually hired child traffickers who manipulated illiterate parents in poor areas of Nepal and stole their girls away from them to live in Kathmandu orphanage funded entirely by Australian donations. So they sent out child traffickers to seek out these children from poor families, to put them in an orphanage so they could ask for donations from 40 people, anybody who was willing to hand money over, estimated $480,000. So people donated monthly, right? You go to work, you struggle or whatever, and we've got kids in our own country suffering and living in poverty and homelessness at the moment. And then you've got this whole shenanigans going on, and these children aren't being put in the orphanage and pretend to be orphans. They're being cared for. They're being brutalized. So people would actually, this is a scary bit. People visited with gifts money and makeup for this orphanage that housed just girls. People later found out the girls were stripped of their gifts. The gifts were either sold off or distributed amongst the orphanage staff and families. And the staff were challenged but refused to return the gifts, one being a TV and a table tennis. So a couple who visited the orphanage from Australia went over there and basically saw people arriving, greeting some of the girls in the orphanage. And the way the girls responded, they kind of looked at them and went, well, that seems a bit odd. It's like they know them. So they also noted that the staff quickly removed these people from the sight of the Australians. And basically, the children were separated and manipulated and threatened that if they told the Australians that they actually had family, they were told they would never see them again. So the organisation Forget Me Not now works to reunite falsified orphans with their family. The CEO of Forget Me Not had to call all the 40 donors and tell them the outrageous truth. So I find this hilarious. The name of the chief executive is Miss Nave. Like, I'm sorry, but that seems a little ironic. So I couldn't believe it when I found it. So, but anyway, she's Nave no more. So she states that she sent a woman called Eve over there to the orphanage in kind of undercover in 2009. And there were extremely enormous amount of disturbing things that sort of ended up with a horrifying conclusion. And she heard the children state that they were saying things like, I want to go home. I miss my mum and dad. I miss my brother. And so basically it was all exposed that these were not real children, that they were orphans. The board of the Nepalese NGO that had partnered knew full well that these girls were trafficked and coerced and were falsely sold off as orphans. Because the parents were illiterate, they were tricked into signing with a thumbprint on documents that gave their children away. They did not know that this would occur. And guess what? Each trafficker received $1,500 for each child that they were able to rip away from their family. So it's people need to rethink orphanages. So once the truth came out, Miss Nave left the organisation, is now dedicated to tracing the girls' real families and reuniting them with supports, education, and better standard of living. So they reckon Australia became the world's first country to recognise orphan trafficking as a form of modern-day slavery. The statistics are 80% of supposed orphans have a living parent, which denies them the status of being a true orphan. And Asian orphanages are notoriously trafficking children to meet volunteer demand. And in 2017, a report revealed there are 567 registered orphanages in Nepal, housing 16,536 children, but there are also many, many more unregistered orphanages. So there's a group called Rethink Orphanages, and it actually encourages Australians to direct their money to families rather than orphanages. So like I said, I had a pastor telling me all about the orphanages the church runs, and I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. If I'm going to support him, I support families. What can you do for me? And that's when it was set up, and I would get reports and photos and information. I got children that were sent to, like they had physical disabilities, they had surgeries, or they had occupational therapy and whatnot. So there are other ways. You don't have to support orphanages in their form because unfortunately, there are pedophiles going and walking into orphanages and they're getting access to these children. So basically, there's supposed to be 150 million orphans globally. However, because these are the statistics that Adopt Change sprout. So they're telling us all to go out and adopt all these orphan children and give them forever families. They say that, but we know by what I shared in the last few weeks that the head person for Adopt Change is Deborah Finesse, and Hugh Jackman backs her up. They didn't follow through what they asked everybody else to do, go find an orphan that's been in the system for years and likelihood of being adopted as zilch. They went and got a newborn baby from a mother and made sure that that mother never had contact again. So they're pushing this orphanage thing. And what I've said and what other reputable organisations say, any child with a living parent is not recognised as a legitimate orphan. They have to have two dead parents to be recognised as an orphan. And the only reason children get orphanages is because mum or dad, one of them's dead or disabled, and they're unable to give them the feed and the schooling that they need. They see what seems to be, a rich orphanage down the road, and out of love, absolute love for their children, they will separate them from them and put them there thinking they're doing the right thing, when in fact those children are being harmed. Institutional care settings are emerging as a third world most prominent site of child sexual exploitation in Southeast Asia. Orphanage tourism exposes children to extremely high risk of sexual exploitation. The Huffington Post reported that in Ukraine there are estimated to be 200,000 children in orphanages, and that faith-based churches, individuals, volunteers are inadvertently funding the human trafficking of these children. The organisation that's called Disabilities Rights International released a report called No Way Home. After a 3-year investigation, they found that children are at risk of being trafficked for sex, labour, pornography and organs in a country that is well known for being a hub of human trafficking. Inside these orphanages in Ukraine, it was found that rampant sexual violence, abuse and rape were commonplace amongst the children. Children are often recruited directly for sex and labour. And of course, we can't go anywhere without discussing Haiti. In Haiti, there's 30,000 children living in orphanages. In 2017, it's estimated that $100 million a year is donated to Haiti by church groups and non-profit organisations. And I wanted to share the story, and I know it was reasonably, there's a story called a lady called Laura Silsby, Silsby. In 2010, she was arrested for kidnapping and child trafficking of 33 children from Haiti. She's a member of and a leader of what they call Central Valley Baptist Church. So on the night of January 29, her and 10 missionaries were arrested while trying to cross the Dominican border with 33 children without proper authorization. They denied any wrongdoing and maintained they were doing God's will by helping orphan victims of the Haiti earthquake that struck in 2010. They accessed the children from a slum area of the city and devastated a city called Calabasas. Twice they were told by police that they were doing the wrong thing, twice verbally, and that they were told, no, you can't do this, illegal. The children were rescued from them and placed in another facility called SOS Children's Village Orphanage. And that's when it became clear that most, if not all, the children were not orphans. Laura maintained that they were told that the children were orphans and that they were providing adoption opportunities for American-loving Christian families. She was charged with kidnapping, and with the help of, guess who? Hillary Clinton and her hubby, the charges were reduced to what they call arranging irregular travel. The prosecution sought a 6-month term, but basically she got off with time served, and if she'd been convicted, she looked at 15 to 20 years jail. So basically she served very little time in jail. Now here's the interesting bit. A guy called, it looks like George Oh, here I go again. I'm tongue-tied tonight. Milo, representing some of the missionaries, so because there were 10 other people with them, he was representing some of the missionaries because he falsely reported himself as a lawyer. But investigations revealed that basically he is being investigated and wanted for sex trafficking in El Salvador. And he's wanted in the United States for people smuggling. So that's a pretty scary thought, that when you think about, you know, and I heard some horrific stories. That story about Haiti really popped out for me. And the number 33 was really interesting as well. That there were 33 children, and they were trying to get over the border, having been told repeatedly that it's illegal. And basically they were looking at a very lengthy jail time till Hillary and Bill Clinton stepped in.
Wow. Yeah, I read I read a lot about her, I must say, in the beginning. It would be good to, and I know we're running out of time here, but I think what would be really good, you know, is her name Tara? Is her surname Winter? The lady you were talking about early on. Is that
Winkler? Winkler. Yes.
Okay, Tara Winkler.
Yes. And she's such a young girl, really, and like, yeah.
Yeah, she's obviously had, you know, she obviously has a lot of inspiration around stuff like that. You know, what would be really good is to kind of get a model in terms of how does someone assist a family. You know, like obviously she's gotten, or she was getting. That's where her desire lies. I think that's really, you know, for me, that would be the answer to whatever is going on here, is when one actually educates people where people need to be educated. So education, basic needs have to be met. It's as simple as that. You know, any crime, any kind of, when you're looking at the rural areas, right, more rural areas, it's created through not having. It's created through poverty, not having money. You know, money has really been something which has been the root of a lot of evil. I'm not saying money is evil, don't get me wrong, but it can be. So what I'm saying with that is that to educate people, you know, I see education as necessary. Basic needs to be met are necessary. So, you know, for me, what would seem to be the best way to start solving this problem is to find ways that these things can be instilled within communities. So you have people with integrity, you know, starting little community centers where you start adult education. They've been doing a lot of that in South Africa for many years now. You know, because apartheid basically robbed African people of education. They didn't have to be educated. There were very few schools for Black people. So you'd find like some of the whites would have little farm schools on their farm and teach them there as much as what you could, you know. But, you know, so now things like adult education, you know, stuff like that, financial planning, basic stuff, family planning, you know, without having to give them 10 million contraceptives. I don't know what the answers are. I really don't know. I'm not saying I have them, but I'm saying that I can see that what is needed, especially in these third world, and you know what? The elites love the third world countries. This is where they reap all the fattest, juiciest cherries, is in the third world country. Rest assured about that. So it's lovely to create that perception of these poor, impoverished, and they make it that way. They make it that way, that the people become poor and impoverished. Yes. So it really is. I mean, the way I see that, the solution is for people to start within their existing communities and education. Give
Yeah.
people a sense of hope, give people a
Yeah.
sense of pride, give people a sense of, we have to have a reason to wake up in the morning, to give people a sense of purpose and meaning in their lives.
Definitely.
Because
Yes.
if people don't have meaning or purpose, that's when we lose our way. So
Oh,
I would love
definitely.
for us to see and that can be an option and that people start doing that. I know I'm certainly
Mm.
looking at doing something like that in my
Yeah.
community, a pedo watch,
Yeah.
getting
Oh,
a group of
definitely. Yes.
women together
Yeah.
that become watchdogs for the community, and then
Yeah.
you get the link to the police station, to the child protection, and it's not an
Mm.
easy thing because you get the right people, and
Yeah.
you've got to follow the law, and things have got to be reported in a certain order in
Mm.
order for anything to be done. So
Yeah.
to educate the public on what we can do in these situations, legal
Yeah.
advice in terms of
Yeah.
this,
I mean,
there's a
we all
lot to
have,
be done.
yeah, we all have neighbours, and a lot of us
Yeah,
don't make the effort to get to know our neighbours. And if that's,
exactly.
and I think everybody wants to help somebody, but stop thinking about in the sense of what you can do in another country. If we all looked in our own backyard, right?
Exactly.
That's we have. If our power, what seems may little, if you just start there, one neighbour at a time, that's that's incredible. And I think as Christians, we need to stop thinking that we're doing this enormous, wonderful work by calling it God's will to take children from third world countries and bring them over to us. uh, the greatest work you will do is to support a family to stay together, to build that
Yes.
community and that country up, not add to its trauma by creating, more generational trauma and look, I have access to many adoptees, what they call international adoptees. They've been adopted from all over the world, brought out here to Australia. Adoption is traumatic and harmful enough when you're born in that country and adopted in that country. When you are taken from your country of origin and placed here, look, it's horrific. If I can try and get somebody on here that's happened to, I will, and they can share their story. But my heart just breaks. It
I would
absolutely
love to
breaks.
hear.
Yes, yes,
Absolutely. I would love to
yeah,
hear from our viewers, and I say this a lot, Aquarius Rising Africa started by exposing the satanic ritual abuse, pedophilia, child sex trafficking, stuff like that. We've always had a platform for our overcomers. And I want to say, and I know there's a couple I'm talking to at the moment who will be not necessarily on this show, but just from the other shows that we're doing, their testimonies, sharing their testimonies. It's beautiful to hear people starting to step up. And it's an amazing healing process. And I'd love to see the same happen here. With people who've had these, whether you've been adopted or you were or are an adoptive parent, your experience around that. I would love to hear more. Let's get these
yeah,
topics out there. These are the things that we need to speak, the things that the world needs to hear. These
yeah,
children didn't just come from nowhere at the turn of the century, at the turn of the 20th century.
yes,
They were created somehow. Where did this whole generation of
yeah,
children just arrive from that didn't have parents? We've got to start asking
yeah,
questions. The whole thing is that we
mm,
need to do, and how we start awakening as communities, as individuals, is we ask questions. I think not enough people are asking questions. It's like,
yeah,
why is that child sitting with that family and look so out of place in a restaurant? We take
yeah,
these things just for granted. Um, Watch the behavior. Use your
yeah,
intuition.
mm,
These are the things we need to start doing now.
yeah,
Maybe speak to the manager if you have a bad feeling and say, listen, there's something going down at that table. draw attention to stuff like that. We have to. We can't just keep quiet and pretend it's not happening anymore. It's because of that this has been spread like it has, because people just they're too fearful.
People stayed quiet when they obviously saw things happening to me as a child, and that probably churned me up more than anything. Not that my adoptive parents were doing it, but the bystanders stood back and did nothing, never intervened on my behalf at all. So I've grown up being an adult thinking nobody is going to help me. If I don't know if you saw my recent post on my Facebook page where I said, you know, is anybody praying out there? I'm not good at asking for help. You know, I'm going through something at the moment. Could people please pray for me? It was so hard for me, right? I'm learning to undo some of the things that were put on me as a kid, because as a child, I could never ask for help, you know, and I expected that nobody was going to help me because people witnessed what happened to me and did absolutely nothing. So, you know, I'm 60 and I'm still trying to break down things that are conditioned to me as a child, and that's what we're looking at. So, you know, don't wait for the child to say, please help me. Don't wait for the adult to say, please help me. If you see something, ask a question. And most of all, what I've learned is that when you see a behavior that you think doesn't quite look right or out of place, or that person's really angry, don't ask why they're acting that way. Ask what happened to them that they should be acting this way. That's the question you need to ask, is what has happened to them, not just look at the behavior. And I think, and once you look at that and you go in with that angle, then you are starting to open up something for that person that they probably never opened up before.
Exactly. And it's like early on in the show when you were dealing with the youngsters saying, I really like you. I think you're such a cool guy.
Yeah.
You know, and that is such a positive, and that is such a good way to do things, you know, is just to start off in that way. And they're like, still like, what do you mean she likes me? Is she lying? She's lying. I'm sure she's lying. What? Yeah. And then, you know, and also back that up with why you like them. You know, that's important as well. You know, I find that is very beneficial, especially when you're working with younger people. And don't lie, because they'll feel that you're lying, okay? So don't lie. There's always something that you like about someone, whether it's the laugh. I love the way you laugh, and you just get everyone around you giggling. Many I've giggled when I've heard you laugh, and then I've got to pull my straight face because I can't allow you to see that, you know? So immediately that creates a great atmosphere in which to start connecting with someone. And I say connecting because that's the important thing, not talking. We often talk at each other and over each other and bombard each other. It's about connection, communicating when you need to, listening when you need to. So it's a two-way street all the time. Anyway, it's been a really, really great conversation again today. We didn't cover the Hart family murders, but we will do that next time then. And and I want to just say to our viewers up front as well, KERRI might not be around as regularly for the next couple of weeks or months, whatever. She's just needing to take some time off as well. We will have her on when she's available and ready, and I hope that she's going to be back in 2 weeks' time, though. But our guys posted, right? So, KERRI.
Oh, look, I'm having some medical stuff, and I'm having treatment for something. I'm doing really well, but just in case I start to have some side effects, I may have to take some time out. So I appreciate any prayers. If anyone's to throw my way, most welcome. I want to thank everybody that's come on today, and I've loved the comments. I love input from people, and really appreciate the feedback that they've really, well, there's one here go, you're spoiling us today. Thank you. So, it's a pleasure to share what knowledge I have, and I thank Chantel most heartedly, and Mornay, those in the background, for inviting me to be a part of this. So thank you.
Yeah, Thea's in the background today. So, thank you so much to Thea.
Yeah.
in the background today. And I want to just again say thank you to our viewers as well. Really appreciate you guys. And the comments are great. So please just comment and share and like. It keeps the algorithms up of our recordings as well. And as you know, there's so much out there at the moment. So sometimes we feel like our voices get lost in this great big echo of chaos going on there, which is why it's so important just to keep sharing, please, and just getting the word out there, because if it just touches one person and just gives one person or anything like good like that, then that's already mission accomplished. That's the intention with what we do here, you know. Even though we talk about the horrible things, there's always hope, there's always healing. Our guests have definitely understood that. And I'm not saying everyone is in the place that we're never in the perfect healed place, I don't think. We've always got something to work with. And it's just beautiful that everyone is in the same rhythm, though. So I'd say thank you so much, KERRI, for another great interview here on Aquarius Rising Africa today. Thank you for Thea in the background, who's made sure everything is running smoothly. Thank you to all our beautiful viewers and guests for your comments and your feedback and your input. Really, really appreciate you guys. Look forward to seeing you again. And I am not here again today. I'm on another time. Take care, everybody. God bless you all. See you soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.